Hello, everyone. My name is Reggie Gackett, and I am excited to welcome you to our third webinar of the 2019 Fall Family Webinar Series. I'm the Assistant Director in the First Year Center, and tonight I am joined by my colleagues Molly Bennett and Hana Johnson, coordinators in Campus Life. We're excited that you have chosen to join us for tonight's conversation. Some information before we get started. First, you will notice that we have given you the ability to submit messages to us during this webinar using the chat function. Please use this feature to ask us questions. These questions will be only seen by staff in the First Year Center and our panelists, Molly and Hana. Two of our professional staff within the First Year Center are helping to field these questions. We will answer those we find applicable to the audience as a whole on this webinar, and we'll respond to more nuanced or personal questions via email next week. Let's go ahead and make sure you know how to use the chat feature. Send us a chat with the location you're watching from, and we will name a few of these on air. While you're doing that, this webinar is being recorded live. Next week, we will upload this webinar to the families.woostel.edu website. Lastly, in a moment, we will hear from our panelists about fraternity and sorority life at Washington University. If something our panelist says sparks a question, don't forget to chat us. After hearing from our panelists, we will move into the Q&A portion of the evening. Before passing things along to Molly and Hana, I want to share some of the places people are joining us from. We have families tuning in from St. Louis, Missouri, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Los Angeles, California, and a couple of other places. Now, since I know you all want to hear more about fraternity and sorority life on campus, I will turn it over to Molly and Hana.
Thanks so much, Reggie. My name is Hana Johnson, and I serve as a coordinator in Campus Life. My fraternity and sorority advising responsibilities include the Women's Panhellenic Association, which are our historically white women's organizations, and the National Panhellenic Council, which are our Divine Nine historically Black fraternities and sororities.
My name is Molly Bennett, and I am the other coordinator in Campus Life working with our fraternities and sororities. My primary advising responsibilities are the Interfraternity Council, which is historically white men's organizations, and Alpha Psi Lambda, our co-ed Latinx fraternity. So today we're going to go over our fraternity and sorority community and tell you a little bit about it, which includes our guiding values, which are the things we want to instill in our students in order to maximize their experience. We'll talk about our community size and the demographics of our community, so you know who and how many make up the experience. We'll talk about academic performance. Then we'll talk about eligibility requirements for joining through the recruitment or intake process, which is important because that begins in January, and then we'll give an overview of those processes.
And if you have additional questions that we don't answer during the course of this webinar, our website is listed on the screen. So as Molly mentioned, we have a few guiding values that guide what we do in fraternity and sorority life. These were developed in spring 2019 with input from many of the student leaders within our community. And these 6 guiding values provide a sense of shared purpose and direction for our one-on-one and group advising, as well as the programs and initiatives we do within the fraternity and sorority community. They are belonging, well-being, social justice, responsibility, self-governance, and personal growth.
So to go over our community size and demographics, we have around 2,400 students that make up our community, which is a large portion of the undergraduate body, coming in at around 35%. These numbers reflect the spring 2019 data, which typically tends to be our largest amount of membership since our primary recruitment period happens in the spring. Of those students, there are 25 chapters, and in those 25 chapters, they belong to 4 entities: Alpha Psi Lambda, co-ed Latinx fraternity, the Interfraternity Council, Women's Panhellenic Association, which are 2 historically white organizations, and then our National Panhellenic Council, which is historically Black and African American. We do want to point out, however, that you do not have to belong to those identities in order to join those organizations, as they're welcome to all people.
As you can see on the slide, there are 4 entities, and here's a breakdown of the chapters under those entities. Our Interfraternity Council is home to 11 chapters, with the 12th coming to campus next spring. Our Women's Panhellenic Association is home to 9 chapters. Our NPHC, or National Panhellenic Council, is home to 4 organizations, and you can see here that some of those chapters are citywide and one is campus-based. A citywide chapter is a chapter that has members not only here at WashU, but also those who may attend other institutions in the St. Louis region, such as St. Louis University, Harris-Stowe State University, and so on. So we have 3 of those citywide chapters currently represented here on campus. And then we have Alpha Psi Lambda, which, as Molly mentioned, is our co-ed Latinx organization on campus.
So we know WashU prides itself on being a research institution where our students perform high academically, and fraternity and sorority students are included in that. We also boast that our organizations often come in above the all undergraduate GPA and the all men's or all women's as well. This is a breakdown of their academic performance where we go through the membership, the semester GPA, number of new members, their GPA, and then we're proud of our members who earn a 4.0 or are included on the dean's list.
Here at WashU, we do have a few criteria that students must meet in order to be eligible to join a fraternity and sorority. Students must be enrolled in 12 credit hours as an undergrad student at WashU during the semester they choose to participate in an intake or recruitment process. And they also must have earned 12 credit hours in their most recent semester of enrollment. So this can include a second semester first-year student here at WashU, or could apply to a transfer student as well. We just expect that they've earned at least 12 college credit hours. Advanced placement credit doesn't count in that 12 hours. We also expect that our students have earned a 2.5 cumulative GPA and that they earned a 2.5 GPA in the most recent semester of enrollment.
In addition to our academic requirements, we do check names through our Office of Student Conduct and Community Standards, as well as our Title IX office. During that name check process, students cannot be found responsible for one or any of the combinations that you see on the screen within the past 2 semesters. We set it up this way so that students are not missing more than 1 recruitment period, so we're not barring them from membership for more than 1 period. In addition to that, students cannot be found responsible for any of these violations at any point during their time at the university. And this includes repeated academic integrity violations, as well as assault and or other issues of violence, which does include the Title IX process. To touch on Alpha Psi Lambda intake, this is a process that is run through the chapter. Typically, they start advertising at the beginning of each semester, letting people know that they're taking in new members. They will advertise their events, their interest sessions. Typically, you can find these on their social media. The best place to find this information would be to search Alpha Psi Lambda at Washington University on Instagram or Facebook. The IFC recruitment process is a loosely structured process that happens at the beginning of every semester. So spring recruitment this year is January 14th through the 23rd. The first few events of that process will be open for anyone to attend. We do recommend that the men that are interested in this process go to all chapters in order to maximize their experience. Then in the middle of the process, it will transition into an invite only. So you will be invited by chapters. You'll receive that through them. And then bid extension will happen at the end of the process. Students may receive bids to multiple fraternities, and they can only choose one. We start the process at the end of this week on Saturday, which is our open houses. I encourage all students to attend those if they're interested in joining an IFC recruitment, and you have to register on WUGO prior to the beginning of recruitment. That can be found by searching Interfraternity Council on WUGO.
The National Panhellenic Council intake process is similarly to Alpha Psi Lambda conducted by each individual chapter, so there's no council involvement, and the timeline of those intake processes is determined by each individual chapter. Students who are interested in an NPHC fraternity or sorority can express interest in their preferred organization by attending chapter programs and events. And the best way to find out when those events are happening is through following those individual chapters on social media. They often utilize campus bulletin boards to post flyers about those events as well. Additionally, there are a couple of key NPHC community programs that take place on campus yearly. One of those being the annual yard show, which takes place in the fall semester, which is an event where our chapters will showcase stepping and strolling. That is a significant cultural piece of their organizations. And then there's an NPHC 101 event that typically takes place semesterly, where students can learn more about each of the individual organizations in NPHC. Lastly, our WPA recruitment process, or Women's Panhellenic Association, does have a registration deadline of December 1st, which is right around the corner, and there is a cost associated with registration, which is $100 as of now. And then on December 8th, there's a mandatory orientation meeting for all participants or potential new members, and we need all of those students participating to return to campus by 5 p.m. on January 6th. The process officially begins on January 7th, and bid day, or invitation to membership, is another word or another way to say bid. That is on January 12th. Here is a graphic detailing the breakdown of how the WPA recruitment process works. On the first day, or the first round, students will visit all 9 of our WPA chapters, and then in the subsequent rounds, you can see that they can visit up to 7, up to 5, and up to 2 chapters. We don't guarantee that every student will hit that maximum 2, 5, or 7, but we do allow them to visit that many each day.
We did want to provide the university's hazing definition, as well as our policy on it. Washington University has a zero tolerance policy on hazing, and we do want to make it clear that if you have any concerns at any point during your child's membership in a fraternity or sorority, to please contact our office. We know that this is a conversation nationally, and so we don't want to downplay how serious this is and how serious we take it as a university. We've provided a few examples here on the slide of what hazing might look like, just so that you have it for your reference. And there's 2 places at the bottom of the screen that if you are concerned about your student, if they're participating in a new member process for any fraternity or sorority, you can report those concerns to Austin Sandoval-Sweeney, who is the Associate Director for Fraternity and Sorority Life. And you can also utilize the Student Conduct Incident Report as well.
Thank you all so much for sharing all of that detailed information. As you were speaking, I was thinking of an initial question that I think many of our family members may be wondering. What are some of the benefits that you would describe a student gets being involved in fraternity and sorority life?
Yeah, I think some of the major benefits, Reggie, are the leadership development that comes with being a member. Oftentimes our students join for the need for community on campus, and then go on to find that they are able to serve in leadership roles such as treasurer, which means they get to manage a budget of tens of thousands of dollars for their organization sometimes, or they get to serve as chapter president, meaning that they get to be a liaison between so many different entities, not only in their chapter, but across the university as well. So lots of leadership development is one thing that comes to mind.
Great. Thank you so much. We're now going to move into the question and answer portion of the evening. So our first question is, how much does it cost to be a member of a fraternity or sorority?
I can speak for our interfraternity council dues. Those dues range from $600 to $900 a semester, and it does vary on the fall or the spring semester. I will say that typically the most expensive time during the experience would be that first semester, your new member semester. And so that includes fees to the national headquarters or fees to be initiated into the fraternity. And then Alpha Psi Lambda, I believe their dues range from $35 a month to $50 a month, again, depending on the month itself.
And then for our Women's Panhellenic Association, as Molly mentioned, the new member time period is often the most costly time period. Those new member dues for our chapters range between $400 and $1,000 depending on the organization. And then for our NPHC organizations, there's a fair amount of variance there as well, typically ranging from $500 to $1,500.
Thank you. How many students participate in recruitment? Of those, how many folks are extended bids?
For our Women's Panhellenic Association process, last year we had approximately 450 women register to participate in the process, and our bid rate or our membership rate after the end of recruitment was about 90%.
For interfraternity council, it depends on the fall or the spring. Typically it's smaller in the fall. Usually around 180 people will participate in that process. And for the spring, around 350 to 400 will participate. Of the people that participate, around 50% do receive a bid. This is a low number, and I think this the factors are various as to why that is, but I'm really excited about the addition of a new IFC fraternity in the spring in order to maximize the potential for more people to join our community.
What steps does the university do to keep my students safe?
As we mentioned, we do take hazing very seriously. So that's one piece of the experience that I know people often ask and wonder about. But in addition to that, I think it's teaching them lessons. So we know that they're 18 to 22-year-olds and they're making decisions, but that's why our office exists. That's why we give professional staff members with education and training in order to help facilitate their process. Hannah touched on the leadership development part of their experience, which is huge, but I also think an important piece is helping one another grow and develop and learn what safety is and have those conversations. And so through our one-on-one advising or our chapter-wide or community-wide advising, we're continuously talking about safety in all aspects.
Thank you. So we know you mentioned this during your presentation, but to clarify, women return to campus early in January for recruitment. Do fraternities also require candidates to return to campus prior to January 13th?
No, they do not. The recruitment process for the Interfraternity Council begins the second day of classes, January 14th. So there's no need to come back any earlier than the date that we ask you to return to campus.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter is flying to St. Louis. Well, not my daughter. I have a parent who's asking, their daughter is flying to St. Louis on January 5th to participate in sorority recruitment. What happens if her flight is delayed and she gets in after 5 p.m.?
So I can answer that one. Our recruitment process doesn't actually begin until the 7th of January. So she will have a buffer. So all of our students who are participating in recruitment are assigned a recruitment counselor, which is an upperclassman student who has chosen to step away from her chapter's recruitment to help support the participants in recruitment. So if a flight is delayed, your student should just reach out to her recruitment counselor, let them know. They will be in communication with me, and we will make sure that your student has all of the information that she needs going into the process. So no stress. We will make sure she has what she needs.
Yeah, thank you. When do students find out the cost per semester? Do they know if during the recruitment process or as they narrow down their options?
That's a great question. So I can answer that for our Women's Panhellenic Association. So we are in the process this year of publicizing our dues for our Women's Panhellenic Association chapters before recruitment. There are if a student has registered for recruitment, they've actually already received that information in what we call the recruitment guide or booklet. So they do have the financial information, cost per membership, cost for membership, etc. They do have access to that information, and we'll be sure also to cover that information at the mandatory meeting on December 8th.
Thank you. We have some folks wondering, is the sorority system queer friendly?
That's a great question. Certainly it is queer friendly. I know of one particular student organization that is an affinity space for queer folks within the fraternity and sorority community, not just the Women's Panhellenic Association. It's called Lambda Q, and that was started by queer students within the fraternity and sorority community. And I know that certainly that is an identity that many of our students in our community hold.
Thank you. We have some folks wondering, I was very, I was very surprised to learn that my daughter was interested in participating in sorority recruitment. She says it's the only real social option at WashU. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think students are drawn to a fraternity or sorority experience because of community building and social opportunities. And I would say that we know that our students do seek out our community for that reason. And we also, as Molly mentioned, do prioritize safety in knowing even that they do seek our experience for social purposes. So I would say that it is a great community, not only for a Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, but also just to have a social community on campus in general. So I think that our students certainly find that they excel in terms of building relationships and connections once they become a member of a fraternity or sorority.
Thank you. If my student participates in recruitment but does not end up joining an organization, what else can they participate in on campus?
I think this is a follow-up to the previous question that was asked about the social experience. We know that the sorority and fraternity experience is a piece of the college experience and not the piece. And so while there is added benefit to joining a fraternity or sorority, we have over 400 registered student organizations on WashU's campus. And so if they do not find their home and their sense of belonging in a fraternity or sorority chapter, they can certainly find that in another place on campus, whether it be through a professional fraternity, or a service organization or something that just takes them out into the wilderness. I guarantee that there's a place they can find something that they're passionate about elsewhere.
Could you remind me quickly what percentage of women are accepted into sororities through the spring recruitment process?
So last year, our placement rate of women who were given bids to membership was right around 90% of students. And I will say, a lot of the women who choose not to persist through the end of the recruitment process, it's not that they are not extended invitations to chapters round after round, but it is more of their personal choice not to persist through the end of the process. So that 90%, a lot of the reason why it's not 100% is because women decide that they would like to withdraw from the recruitment process.
Thank you. If my student is participating in fraternity sorority life, does my student have to live in sorority or fraternity housing?
So at WashU, we do not have housing specifically for our sororities, but we do have houses that are currently occupied by our interfraternity council organizations, 10 out of the 11, soon to be 12. And there is no formal requirement for individual students to live in a fraternity house on campus, but the fraternities themselves often will require their members to live in the fraternity house for some portion of their experience in the chapter. And that typically comes their sophomore year and sometimes into their junior year. The reason that we ask them to fill their houses is truly to maximize that community, because living in a house with people that you deeply care about and deeply care about you is going to just positively impact your fraternity experience, and we want to promote that.
As a follow-up from that, can you tell us a little bit about why there are only fraternity houses and not sorority houses?
Absolutely. I think the biggest answer is space. There's just not enough space on this campus to have sorority houses at this time. There are a lot of tall tales as to why they do or do not, or what's coming. And so right now we have spaces, and right now the fraternities are occupying them, but that could look different in 10, 20, 30 years.
With that being said, while there are no sorority houses on campus, are there residential halls or spaces where sorority women can live together?
Not formally. We are having conversations about that all the time, but through the group process through Res Life, and I would encourage you, if you're interested in this, to check out the Res Life's website on the group housing process. You can form groups that are typically with chapter members, or other Panhellenic women will enjoy living together. And so while it's not formal, there is absolutely an opportunity for you to live with members of your organization.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Does being in a fraternity guarantee on-campus housing, and do all fraternities have houses?
Being in a fraternity does not guarantee a spot in the house. Our house sizes range from 17 to 38. And so some of the houses that have smaller bed spaces, sometimes if you are a sophomore, preference may be given to a junior. And so there's that piece of it, but it doesn't guarantee you a spot. But typically there is a spot for you. And right now, not all fraternities have houses. Only 10 out of our 11 have a house on campus.
Thank you. We're going to shift gears a little bit. Another question about sorority recruitment. Is there an additional cost to living in the residence halls during that time? And are the dining halls open?
Great question. So we have great campus partners in residential life and in dining services, and they have done a lot of great work. So they have allowed our students to live in the residence halls just based on the cost of the plan that they have to live there. So there's no extra cost. They do need to fill out the winter break housing request form on the Residential Life website in order to be able to move back early. So that's an important note for all of you out there. And that form is due on December 9th. So they do need to fill out that form, but there's no additional cost. And then our dining services partners have worked with us to have on-campus dining options open, specifically in the Duck and on the South 40. So yes to the dining hall question.
It sounds like fraternity recruitment is a very competitive process with only about 50% of men receiving bids. What advice do you have for a student who is very interested in joining a fraternity, but as a new student has yet to meet active members and hasn't been able to network himself?
I would say that 50% makes it seem like it's a competitive process, and I'm not going to discount that. But I will also say that a lot of men that participate in IFC recruitment go in with preconceived notions about the chapter that they wish to join. And so my advice would be for a student going through the process to attend all of the open houses. I mentioned that there's an open house on Saturday, and so it'll be from 6 to 8 p.m. At all of the houses. Walk in, introduce yourself, become familiar with these organizations, and don't go off reputation alone. And I would say the same for the actual recruitment process that happens in January. Don't set your sights on just one or two particular chapters. Make sure to maximize that experience and visit all of them, and that's your networking opportunity.
So we have a parent who has looked on the Fraternity and Sorority Life website, and they have the following question. There appear to be several fraternities not in good standing. What does good standing and not in good standing mean?
So I'm glad that this is being looked at, because I think that this is a valuable tool for transparency between our community and our university, and the people that care about the experience that fraternities and sororities provide. And so this chart is that we're referring to is updated in real time. And so as cases are solidified or the outcomes come out, this is updated. And so not in good standing means that there has been an incident and they have been found responsible for the allegation against them. And this means that they're completing sanctions, typically educational in nature, and they are not in good standing until those are complete. If they hit a certain amount of strikes, which we do use a strike system when it comes to social events, they could be placed on social probation, or for the IFC fraternity houses, it could mean housing probation. And so not in good standing means that we're still waiting on some educational sanctions to be followed up on.
Have there been any hazing complaints against any of the fraternities or sororities here at WashU?
If this is the case, it will be reflected on our website. And so to honor the integrity of those processes, I would encourage you to look at that website, which, like I said, is updated in real time. And so if there have been any hazing complaints against them, they will be listed on the website. And that goes for now, 2 weeks from now, in January. And so always be checking that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
How much jurisdiction or control does the university have over activities in individual chapters?
So acknowledging that our organizations do have inter or national headquarters, they oftentimes have stipulations or education requirements or structures in place that their headquarters are giving them. And so that's one part of their experience. And then I would say the other part of their experience is what we as university administrators are trying to provide for them. And so it's a nice harmony between those two people that care about their experience. And so I would say that we have as much jurisdiction as the university can have, while also acknowledging that we have other partners in their experience as well.
Great, thank you so
Yeah.
much. So Harvard has moved to eliminate all fraternities and sororities on their campuses. Has WashU considered this? Why or why not?
I can take that one. We have not considered eliminating fraternities and sororities on campus. We believe, I think as we've mentioned, that the fraternity and sorority experience does add a valuable aspect to a student's college experience. And we certainly have partners, like I mentioned, across campus who are also supportive of the fraternity or sorority experience. And we continue to have a staff of 3 full-time staff members who support our community. And we certainly believe that it does add value to a student's experience. So we are supporting them in their endeavors.
Thank you. Could you remind me, what do you do if a hazing complaint is filed?
Yeah, so if we receive a hazing complaint, we will work closely with our campus partners in the Office of Student Conduct and Community Standards to investigate that complaint. So that typically means meeting with students in both the new member process and the active members of that chapter to really get to the bottom of what's happening. And then if a chapter is found responsible for hazing, there will be sanctions issued and there will be appropriate follow-up as of that. So it's certainly something that we take seriously and we move swiftly on because we do believe that the safety of our students is paramount, and we want to ensure that we are doing our diligence to follow up accordingly.
Thank you. Could you remind us, why do you keep using the phrasing traditionally white when referring to IFC and NPAC groups?
You got it?
I'm glad this question's being asked. So I think when we say fraternity and we say sorority, we typically think of those organizations that are IFC and NPC affiliated. What we know is that there are other experiences given to our students through NPHC and multicultural Greek organizations such as Alpha Psi Lambda. And so we don't want to use the term fraternity as a blanket statement or sorority describing just NPC sororities, because we want to give validity to those other experiences as well. And so when you think about the traditional fraternity or sorority experience, I think oftentimes it is a traditionally white image. And so that is why we're using that phrasing.
Could you remind us, what is the website to check the standing and hazing complaints that you had referenced earlier?
Yeah, it's students.wustel.edu, and in the search bar, please search Fraternity and Sorority Life, and there's a page that is conduct standing and chapter standing.
Thank you so much. Could you describe to us what the time commitment associated with being in a fraternity or sorority looks like?
Yeah, so students who are members will have weekly meetings that we typically call chapter meeting. And that meeting is traditionally for a lot of our organizations on Sunday, and it's probably between 1 to 2 hours. And that is an expectation for all members. And then if a student is in a leadership role, they could probably plan to spend another 1 to 2 hours at least in meetings a week, whether that be an executive board meeting, a meeting with one of us, a meeting with maybe their alumni chapter advisor. So I would say that certainly it ranges depending on how involved your student is with their organization, but at minimum, 2 hours probably for that chapter meeting. And then there might be other required expectations as well, but probably no more than 3 to 5 hours a week for a general member.
Thank you. And this is the last question that we've received. What recommendations do you have regarding housing selection for first-year students who are planning to go through the recruitment process during the spring semester?
That's a great question. I'm glad it's being asked. So like we said, we have great partners in Res Life that we have partnered with to make sure we're getting the timeline right. Earlier, I mentioned the group housing process where you can select the group that you're going to be a part of. And we've got that timeline down to where that comes after the fraternities are able to select who will be living in their houses. And so first year students can expect, if there is room in their fraternity chapter, in the house, that they could move in if they want to. And so make sure to ask those questions during recruitment. And then for the fall semester, like I mentioned, the group housing process comes after the fraternity housing process. So if you know you want to live in a fraternity house, it's highly recommended that you let that chapter know so they can fill their house in the fall.
We've received another question. Can students deactivate if it's not meeting their expectations?
So one thing we say about our fraternity and sorority experience is, while I'm no longer in college, I still am a member of my fraternity or of my sorority. And so while we want that experience to be lifelong and impactful for them. If they find that it is not, there is a way to deactivate from their organization. And it typically just means notifying the chapter that they'd like to do this, and then letting the inter or national headquarters know that they no longer wish to be a member of the chapter.
Great, thank you so much. So as a reminder, this recording will be available at our families.wustl.edu website after this webinar is all the way through. Molly and Hannah, thank you so much for the information that you've shared tonight. I do have one last question for you all. What is your last piece of advice for family members of students who may be going through the recruitment process?
We know that the recruitment process can be taxing on students because they're meeting a lot of people. If they're an introvert, they might need to take some time to themselves. So just make sure to check in with them often. Encourage them to ask good questions. That's the only way they're going to know actually how the organizations that they're trying to join are, they're going to answer those questions. And so check in with them, see if they need anything, be encouraging, and encourage them to participate in all of the recruitment processes and visit every chapter that they can.
And I would say from my perspective, it's that they should just be themselves. I think so often our students put a lot of pressure on themselves to be who others might want them to be, especially in this process. And I think, as Molly said, it's so important for them to find a place where they feel like they are comfortable and where they feel like they can be themselves. And so I would just encourage them as much as possible not to put that unnecessary pressure on themselves, and to know that their opinions matter as well.
Molly, Hannah, the information you provided us this evening was extremely valuable. I am confident that families of WashU students have learned a lot from your presentations and questions. Families, we hope you learned valuable information this evening. Stay tuned for our next webinar, a conversation with the Career Center, occurring on Tuesday, December 3rd. You'll be able to register for this webinar at families.wustl.edu. We'll see you then.